All right, saving our work as we go, building up our vector. Just a little bit more. We're trying to get the black vector finished today. Don't know if I'll get it all finished in this one video, but I will get something that I can show you how to save and post. So I'm going to use the pencil tool. That seems to be working well. I had merged everything except for this little thing, this little arch. And I wanted to show you this trick with it. If I copy it, Command C or Edit Copy, then I say Edit Paste, it will offset it and put it somewhere else. So it put it over there, and it just did a tiny bit. So I always find it helpful to say copy, Command C, and then Edit Paste in place. And that is like duplicate in Illustrator. It gives me an exact copy right on top. And then I can just move it. And what's great about vectors, remember, they're infinitely scalable. So even though I drew that as a nice, clean little arch, I can grow that to be a much bigger arch. And this is why there's a lot of repetition in logo design, because it's very easy to take vector elements and then just repeat them in several areas throughout the design, like your shapes for your emoji. So you see how that arch is almost what I need for the helmet. And I'm just using the large selection tool to find the angles. And that might be a better design for the top than, no, I kind of like what I have. But that's something I can work with. So I can at least start with that. I can take its opacity down. I can do that under Properties with opacity. But I tend to like to always see my layers, so I'll do that with my Transparency Window tool. And then I can just use my pencil. And I don't need to worry about the top of the arch. It's pretty much where I want it. I'm just going to worry about this bottom part. And do some of this ornate, kind of reflective texturing that also gives me the letters NLC within the helmet itself. Even though we'll be doing type design later, it's kind of a cheeky way to play with it. Hidden text. Now, one of our logo design approaches was positive and negative space. That was a tricky one to learn, but it gets us to pay attention to the difficulty of balancing black and white shapes. And this is no different, right? So as I'm building the NLC, I want to make sure that those white spaces are as interesting as the black ones. Man, I just can't get a good angle on that. And if I really wanted to clean it up, I could always use the pen tool, right? Just can't get that angle. There it is. It's underneath the magnifying glass. So it's the rotate view. So if you're having a really hard problem, you can always just rotate with the angle. You can always rotate your working area. It's underneath the magnifying glass. And then you just click on it to take it back to its original orientation. There we go. But that can help a lot. And just double click it and it will go back. And especially for hand drawing curves, that's often needed. I can also just hit minus and get right to the subtract anchor point tool. I can hit Shift C to get to the Convert Anchor Point tool and to play with these curves, to turn them into straight sometimes, or to turn them back into curves. Play with them independent of each other. So there's all these options we have. Okay, let's see. If I take that opacity back up to 100, what more do I need? What can I do? I can just use a good old rectangle shape tool. Use the large selection tool to angle it. Put it in its place. To squeeze it. And then I can merge it with what I have. And then correct some of those angles. So maybe before I merge it, I add an anchor point. I can just use the pen tool. Remember, if I just hover over, it will add an anchor point for me. And then I can use the small selection tool, move that up, move that anchor point. You have to be really exact on your selections. Move that anchor point in. And then I can also play with these anchor points. Let it go kind of thick to thin. And then maybe play with this one a little bit. Let that get a little bit thicker. I don't want it ever to get too thin. And then I can use Shift C, or what's underneath the pen tool, to convert these to curves. Nice shallow curves. Before I merge them. Then when I'm happy with it, I can merge them using Pathfinder. Let's deselect. Just clicking off. Move in to where I want to zoom in and zoom in. And then I can clean these up. Just these little tiny jogs. With the small selection tool. Just to even those anchors up. So there are a few more anchor points than I need there, but it does the job. And now I can continue to build that way. Let's just use the pen tool very quickly just to do this stuff. Just do it all as straights. I just have to end where I started. Okay. And now, use the small selection tool. I'm going to round it out a little bit, just like I did for the crenellations. And on the inside. And here I can move it. And around it just slightly. And here, I'm going to delete an anchor point. And then this is another trick that's really helpful. If I can find it, the lasso tool. It's under the small selection tool. You can take, I have to isolate it, but I can take an end of a shape like this one. I need to lock this one first. There we go. And I can lasso the end of it. It will grab all those anchor points. And then when I use the small selection tool to move it, it will move that end independent of the rest, which can be really helpful. So I'm not sure if that made sense, but instead of it moving just one anchor point, when I lasso multiple anchor points, it can move all of those together. I can kind of change it. I actually want this to arc down a little, so this is awkward. And the way to make that work is to play with converting these anchor points to curves. So just arcs down slightly. And I bring this one in. So I want that to be fairly sharp. And then I can convert this one to a curve. Remember, curves are on both sides. And then I want to bring the other handle in. Keep it straight. Whew, so much for these little details. But the pen tool was definitely a good choice there for that nice curve. For this, let's unlock it. I'm just going to try to clean it up with the pencil tool because it's pretty sloppy. It should feel like a sharp feather. And then let's merge it together, because I can't really clean it up until they're merged. And then I can cut it all out of the same paper. Okay, and then this. I try to freehand this with the pencil tool. Though my straight curves are not the best. Thicken it out. Yeah. Nope, going to use the pen tool. I'm just going to plot it with straights, just like I did before. Give myself an anchor point in the middle so I can adjust the curve and then close it up. And then I'm going to convert the anchor point to a curve. Whoops. Like so. And then use the small selection tool to move that anchor point in. And then I'm going to use the pen tool to add an anchor point here. Small selection tool to move that. And then I'll show you the difference between, instead of using the convert anchor point tool, I'll just round out this corner. And you see how it pushes it between the two, but it's hard to get really shallow, so I'll convert and stretch it out. On both sides. This is tiny little aspects of the logo. So there it is. There we go. Curve on both sides. And that gives me curves that I can then independently adjust. Where'd the other one go? It's down here. That's where it is. I'm just going to go ahead and